Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Risking Everything, a steamy anthology of first responders. And I'm reading from Reconstructed Heart by K.L. Montgomery. This is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. It didn't matter how many years I'd been a cop. Every time my phone rang in the middle of the night, my heart bugged out. It was the kind of adrenaline rush that woke you up with a force equivalent to drinking an entire pot of coffee. And that night had been no different. I got the phone call, stumbled out of bed in a flash, and was dressed and ready to go within a matter of minutes. The entire time I was driving to the accident scene, I prepared myself for what I would see. I'd been on the collision reconstruction team for a year, and I was still shocked sometimes by how gruesome the mangled wreckage and bodies could be. Having a strong stomach helps, that's a requirement for the job, but if I didn't keep my mind focused on the professional side of things, it was easy to get caught up in the tragedy of it, the humanity. Not that I was a stone-cold, motionless asshole, not at all, but the job called for a certain degree of stoicism I was still perfecting. I had learned a lot during the 6 years I spent on patrol, but the rest of my 20-year career loomed before me. I could only imagine how steeled and grizzled I'd be by the end of it. "Hey Mathers, what have we got?" I asked as soon as I stepped out of my vehicle and headed toward the cluster of state troopers a few feet away from the wreckage. Red and blue lights swirled around the scene like someone was twisting a kaleidoscope over and over again. Glass glittered on the roadway as it caught on the lights. Twisted metal and the faint smell of smoke filled my senses. Presumably, one of the vehicles had caught fire. Sure enough, I spotted the fire truck just down the road. A trooper stood another 50 yards from that with road flares blocking the northbound lanes, directing what little traffic remained at this hour down a country road winding off into the dark night. Ambulance already carted off the two drivers. No passengers. Probably a DUI. Mathers pointed to the red car. They were both pretty beat up, but I could tell one was red and one was white. The white one looked in worse shape. Witnesses say the red car was going the wrong way down Route 1. Fucking drunk bastard, I thought to myself. Mathers nodded over to a group of 3 witnesses huddled near the guardrail talking to an officer whose back was toward me. Probably a female trooper, I thought, judging by the short stature. I mentally reviewed the steps of collision reconstruction I'd learned and applied more often than I cared to admit in the past year. It involved a lot of math, which I'd always excelled at in school, plus critical thinking, which I liked to think I excelled at. I'd need to drag out my equipment soon, tools to take measurements, a camera to take photos. I'd collect a ton of data and take it back to my office to analyze. I had just finished unloading the drag sled when I noticed the female officer sauntering over toward me as she stuffed a tiny notebook into her blue uniform shirt pocket. I didn't recognize her, and with her campaign hat pulled low on her head, I couldn't make out her features. "Hey," she stopped right in front of me. You holding up okay?" I looked at her, still not placing her face. She appeared to have dark hair, but it was hard to tell with the hat on. She was young, that much was clear, probably newer to the job than me. Then the headlights of the approaching tow truck swooped across her face, and I instantly noticed her dough-brown eyes and full lips, the kind that curl up on the ends even when the owner isn't smiling. "Holding up?" I repeated. I'd never had a colleague ask me that when I was there to take my measurements and complete my investigation, not even in the most grisly of circumstances. "Yeah, because, you know." She took her hat and pursed her lips, her eyebrows drawing together. She nudged her head toward the red car. The tow truck had pulled up to the mangled mess and was beginning to rig it up to take it away. As she returned her gaze to me, she settled the hat back into place, and a shadow consumed her face again. I shook my head, still unsure what she was talking about. "I guess I don't know." Her face fell. It went from mere concern to downright devastation in a heartbeat. "What?" I scanned her face, looking for clues as to why she wasn't just spitting it out. "It's not my mom's car or something, right? I didn't recognize the car, and it had Pennsylvania tags. I figured it was just another tourist coming down to Rehoboth Beach to vacation or party, getting drunk, and then deciding to drive. Unfortunately, I saw it all the time, both now at the scene of the crash and when I was on patrol, back when I was more of a preventative measure trying to pull them over before the crash. Who knew how many lives I'd saved from the barrels of drunk driving?" "Dawson was driving that car," she revealed, looking over her shoulder as it was hoisted up onto the bed of the tow truck. Dawson? Tim Dawson? I confirmed, then shook my head. He doesn't drive a red car. He doesn't have Pennsylvania tags. She nodded and sucked in a long breath that she swallowed down before opening her mouth to speak. It was obvious she was trying to keep from crying. He was off duty. We think it was his girlfriend's car. That's all she had to say for it to register in my head that my former shift mate may have been the victim of a drunk driver. How the hell could that even be? The guy was notorious for DUI arrests, always led the troop every year. One year he had the most DUI arrests in the entire state of Delaware. Is he? She shook her head. I don't know. He was alive but unresponsive when the medics got here. She shook her head. Fucking shame. I couldn't speak. A lump the size of Texas had grown in my throat, and I was surprised I could even breathe. Tim Dawson and I worked on B's shift together for a total of 5 years, broken up by 2 years on different shifts. He was my field training officer, someone I looked up to, someone I felt close to, and someone who had cheered me on when I told him I was ready to leave the shift and pursue a position with the collision reconstruction unit. Mather said Dawson was your FTO, the female trooper said next. She obviously knew a lot more about me than I did about her. I nodded, but my throat was so tightly constricted there was no way any words were coming out. I read the silver nameplate on her uniform. Lobato. She had a nice smile, but the way she was looking at me now made me uncomfortable. It was the way an adult looks at a child who just lost one of his grandparents or a pet. A mixture of empathy and pity. He was. I was finally able to confirm. Just shifting my focus to her for a nanosecond cleared the lump in my throat. I don't think we've met before. Sorry, I'm Jenna Lobato. She extended her hand, and I learned rather quickly how firm her grip was. Are you new to Troop 7? She nodded. Yeah, I've been here like 2 months. Came down from up north and took Calverson's spot after he was promoted to sergeant. Gotcha. I watched her eyes dart back to the tow truck as it finally made its way north down Route 1. There went one of the cars. Another truck would arrive shortly for the other one, which was in even worse shape than the red car. Fucking drunk drivers. You're Prince, right? She took off her campaign hat again to reveal a neatly coiled bun at the back of her head. Not a hair was out of place, all sleek and slicked back into her bun, which was held with a number of shiny metal pins that reflected the lights when they swirled over us. Trey Prince, I confirmed, giving her my first name. I thought so. I heard about you. She looked like she lost her battle not to smile, her lips curling up in their natural arc. All bad, I assume, I joked with her, happy to have a distraction from the news she delivered just moments ago. I knew I'd have to go back to that news, sort it out in my head, stop by the hospital and see if I could get some info on Dawson. But in this moment, I just wanted to suspend myself in blissful ignorance. Her smile broadened. Mostly good, in fact. After another sweep over my face and down my uniform, which for the CRU included a navy blue polo shirt with the DSP insignia and khaki pants, nothing nearly as official looking as her own, her smile vanished into the night air. Are you going to be okay? Yeah, of course, I answered on instinct. I knew I wasn't going to be okay, in fact, not by a long shot. I had a long night ahead of me finishing my measurements, looking at the accident report, and hopefully getting some good news about Dawson. Good. She reached out to pat me on the arm. I'll let you get back to work then. I know you guys have a lot of stuff to do. She glanced down the road at my partner, who had his camera out and was probably pissed that I was talking to someone instead of helping him. Yeah, okay. Thanks for letting me know about Dawson. I wished we could talk more, but that I could stay in this semi-happy oblivion with her empathetic eyes and soft New York accent. She was definitely not a Delaware native. Yeah, surprised Mathers didn't tell you, but yeah, okay. She seemed reluctant to pull away also. Okay, back to work. I smiled again and gave a small wave. She started to turn, but another sentiment fell out of my mouth before I could stop it. I hope to run into you again sometime. That beaming smile was back. Me too. She coughed a little, clearing her throat. Under better circumstances, though, I hope. Right, I agreed. This time when she turned, I didn't interrupt her. She headed back to her sergeant to confirm she'd done everything she needed to do before she climbed into her Tahoe and drove off, making a U-turn and heading south, back to the troop maybe, if I had to guess. I made my way over to my partner, a trooper near retirement. I was pretty sure Dave Chalmers had been with the state police for almost as long as I'd been alive. He'd switched over to the CRU a few years before me, and we nearly always worked together. I liked him, but he was a stickler for details. Okay, it was beyond stickler status. It was more like OCD status. But I guess that's the way we needed it to be if we wanted accuracy. Shame about Dawson, he said as soon as I was within earshot. Yeah, I agreed, even though my understanding was that he was still alive. He better be. Otherwise I'm going to hunt down that asshole who hit him and give him a piece of my mind. Can you head down to that skid mark? He pointed south, his eyes following a line of tire tracks where one of the drivers had obviously slammed on the brakes. Probably Dawson. I was sure it was scary as fuck to see a car coming head-on in the wrong lane. What was Tim doing out here at 2 a.m. driving his girlfriend's car? I wondered as I made the trek to the point Dave directed me to. The bars here closed at 1. There was really no reason for him to be out that late. He hadn't just gone 10 to 7. I started in on the task Dave had given me when Sergeant Mathers headed in my direction. We had worked together for 3 years before I transferred to the CRU, so we knew each other pretty well. Sorry I didn't fill you in on earlier about Dawson. He reached out to clasp my shoulder with his broad hand. It was a lot for me to take in, too. Yeah, I understand. It's fine. I forced a smile. Hope he will pull through. What about the other driver? The drunk fucker. Mathers shook his head. No. The look on his face was something between disgust and regret, and I could see he was having trouble forming words. Of all the reconstruction scenes I'd worked, I'd never come across one that choked up so many people. Usually it was the drunk driver who lived, and the victim who died, but I was glad in this case it might be the other way around. Hopefully Dawson would pull through. He was fit, in good shape for his age. I was pretty sure he had just turned 40 a few months ago. The other driver wasn't the drunk fucker, Mathers finally ground out. I stood there, staring at him blankly. The amorphous look of disgust and regret was tinged with anger as the meaning behind his words slowly sank into my head. Dawson was drunk? Even the way it came off my tongue, it was steeped in disbelief. There was no way. Not the king of DUI arrests. It was completely unfathomable. Mathers didn't get a chance to respond before his cell phone rang. He retrieved it from his pocket and shot me an apologetic look as he stepped away to take the call. I was still reeling from shock. Dawson is the one who was drunk. Had Jenna Lobato known Dawson was drunk when she came over to ask me if I was okay? I looked up to see if she was still around, but then remembered I'd watched her drive off. Obviously, a combination of my fatigue and my emotions was getting to me. I couldn't wrap my head around a logical reason that my buddy Tim Dawson would drink and drive. He hated drunk drivers. I shouldn't say it in the past tense. He hates drunk drivers. It was the part of his job he was most passionate about, locking up assholes who drank and drove. But then he gets behind the wheel when he's been drinking? It was inconceivable. I noticed Mathers ambling back in my direction, an unreadable expression on his face. He had one of those square-cut jaws, and at this late hour a silvery shadow was creeping onto it. I couldn't call it a 5 o'clock shadow when it was 2 in the morning. These overnight shifts were the worst. He stood in front of me for a full 2 seconds, lifting his eyes from the pavement to mine as the blue and red lights continued to strobe around us. He scrubbed his hand down his face, then opened his eyes to bore into mine again. Without flinching, he delivered the final blow. That was the hospital. Dawson just passed.